The ship broke apart like glass, shattering in slow motion. Park Tai-ho felt the floor disappear beneath his feet as the cargo freighter Wanderer's Rest tore itself into pieces. Alarms screamed. Red lights flashed everywhere. He heard his crewmates shouting, but their voices were swallowed by the roar of escaping air. Tai-ho ran. His legs moved without thinking, carrying him toward the escape pods at the back of the ship. He had practiced this drill 100 times, but nothing prepared him for the real thing. The hallway twisted and buckled around him. Sparks flew from broken cables. The smell of burning metal filled his nose. He reached the escape pod and threw himself inside. His fingers found the launch button and slammed down hard. The pod shot away from the dying ship just as the main fuel tank exploded. Through the small window, Tai-ho watched the Wanderer's Rest become a ball of fire and debris. 12 people had been on that ship. 12 friends. 12 lives gone in an instant. The pod tumbled through space, its navigation system damaged by the blast. Tai-ho strapped himself in and waited. There was nothing else he could do. The pod's computer searched for the nearest solid ground and found a moon called Velis 4. It was barren and cold, but it had breathable air. The computer adjusted course and began its descent. The landing was rough. The pod bounced 3 times before finally stopping against a rocky cliff. Tai-ho's head hit the wall, and everything went dark for a moment. When he opened his eyes, blood was running down his face from a cut on his forehead. His ribs ached. His left arm felt wrong, maybe sprained, but he was alive. Tai-ho pushed open the pod's hatch and stepped onto the surface of Velis 4. The air was thin and cold, but he could breathe. The sky above was purple and gray, filled with swirling dust clouds. In the distance, he could see mountains of black rock rising from the ground like broken teeth. He was alone, completely alone on an empty moon, with limited supplies and a damaged rescue beacon that might never work. The nearest human outpost was weeks away at normal travel speed. No one knew he was here. No one was coming. Tai-ho wanted to sit down and cry. He wanted to scream at the unfairness of it all. But he had learned long ago that crying and screaming did not solve problems. His mother had taught him that. She had worked 2 jobs after his father died, never complaining, always finding a way forward. He would do the same. First, he needed shelter. The dust storms on Velis 4 could strip flesh from bone. The escape pod was damaged and would not protect him for long. Tai-ho looked around and spotted a cave entrance in the nearby cliff face. It was dark inside, but darkness was better than being torn apart by wind and sand. He gathered what supplies he could carry from the pod: food packets, water containers, a medical kit, a flashlight, and some basic tools. Then he walked toward the cave, each step heavy with exhaustion and grief. The cave was deeper than he expected. Tai-ho followed it for nearly 100 meters before it opened into a larger chamber. His flashlight swept across the walls, revealing strange patterns carved into the stone. They looked old, very old, like something made by intelligent hands long before humans ever reached this part of space. But that was not what made Tai-ho stop breathing. In the center of the chamber, there was a nest. It was made of some kind of dried plant material and soft fibers, arranged in a perfect circle about 3 meters wide. Inside the nest were 6 eggs. They were large, each one the size of a human torso, and they glowed with a faint inner light that pulsed slowly like a heartbeat. Tai-ho approached carefully, his heart pounding in his chest. He had never seen anything like this. The eggs were beautiful, their shells covered in swirling patterns of blue and silver. They were warm to the touch, radiating gentle heat into the cold cave air. Then he saw the body. Lying beside the nest was a creature unlike anything in human records. It was large, maybe 4 meters long, with a serpentine body covered in scales that might have been beautiful once. It had 4 limbs ending in delicate claws, and a face with large, intelligent eyes that stared at nothing now. The creature was dead, crushed by rocks that had fallen from the cave ceiling. Tai-ho understood immediately what had happened. The explosion of the Wanderer's Rest had caused a shock wave that reached the surface. The cave had partially collapsed. This creature, this mother, had died protecting her eggs. Her body was positioned over the nest, shielding it from the falling rocks. She had given her life for her children, and her children were still alive. Tai-ho could see the eggs moving slightly, the glow inside them pulsing with life. But they were getting colder. Without their mother's warmth, They would die within hours, maybe less. Taiho stood there for a long moment, looking at the eggs and the dead mother. He thought about his own situation. His supplies were limited. His rescue beacon was broken. He might die on this moon regardless of what he did. The smart thing would be to ignore the eggs, focus on his own survival, and hope for rescue. But he kept looking at the mother's body, at the way she had curled around her children even in death. He thought about his own mother, working herself to exhaustion to feed him and his sister Yuna. He thought about all the times someone had helped him when they had no reason to. Taiho made his decision. He went back to the escape pod and spent the next 6 hours taking it apart. He removed the heating unit, the power cells, the insulation panels. He carried everything back to the cave piece by piece, his injured arm screaming in pain with each trip. By the time the first dust storm hit, Taiho had built a makeshift heating system around the nest. The eggs were warm again, their glow steady and strong. He sat beside them, exhausted and bleeding, eating a small portion of his limited food. He did not know what would hatch from those eggs. He did not know if the creatures inside would be friendly or dangerous. He did not even know if he would live long enough to find out, but he knew he had made the right choice. "I will keep you safe," he whispered to the eggs. "I promise." Outside, the wind howled and the dust flew. Inside the cave, surrounded by glowing eggs and the body of their mother, Park Taiho closed his eyes and slept. 3 weeks passed on Velis 4. 3 weeks of dust storms and cold nights and terrible loneliness. Taiho had counted every day by making marks on the cave wall with a sharp rock. 21 marks now? 21 days of survival on a moon that wanted him dead. His supplies were running low. He had rationed his food carefully, eating only enough to keep himself alive. His body had grown thin and weak, but he refused to give up. Every morning he checked the eggs first. He adjusted the heating system, cleaned the dust from their shells, and talked to them like they could hear him. Talking helped with the loneliness. Taiho told the eggs about his life on Earth, about growing up in the coastal city of Busan. He described the ocean, the way it sparkled under the sun, the sound of waves hitting the shore. He told them about his mother, who had died 5 years ago from working too hard. He told them about his sister Yuna, who was still on Earth, studying to become a doctor. "She is smart," Taiho said to the eggs one night, sitting close to them for warmth. "Much smarter than me. I was never good at school. I was good at fixing things. That is why I became an engineer. I fix broken machines. I make things work again." He laughed softly at himself. "I do not know if I can fix this situation, but I will try." The eggs seemed to pulse brighter when he spoke to them. Taiho told himself it was just his imagination, but part of him believed they were listening. On the 22nd day, the first egg began to crack. Taiho was checking the heating system when he heard the sound. A soft tap, 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 like someone knocking on a door from inside. He turned and saw a thin line spreading across the surface of the largest egg. His heart jumped into his throat. He watched, barely breathing, as the crack grew wider. A piece of shell fell away, revealing something wet and shining underneath. A small claw pushed through, followed by another. Then a head emerged covered in slick membrane that quickly dried in the warm air. The creature that crawled out of the egg was about the size of a cat. It had a serpentine body like its dead mother, covered in tiny scales that shimmered with colors Taiho had no names for. 4 small limbs ended in delicate claws that gripped the edge of the nest. Its eyes were large and golden, filled with an intelligence that seemed too deep for something just born. The creature looked at Taiho. He looked back at it. For a long moment, neither moved. Then the creature made a sound, a soft chirping noise that seemed to contain a question. It crawled toward Taiho on unsteady legs, sniffing the air. When it reached him, it climbed onto his lap and curled up against his stomach, pressing its small body against his warmth. Taiho felt tears running down his face. He did not know why he was crying. He carefully placed his hand on the creature's back, feeling the flutter of its tiny heartbeat. "Hello," he whispered. "I am Taiho. I will take care of you." Over the next 3 days, the other eggs hatched one by one. Each creature was slightly different. Some were larger, some smaller. Their scale patterns varied. Their eye colors ranged from gold to silver to deep purple. But they all did the same thing when they emerged. They looked at Taiho. chirped their questioning sound, and came to him for warmth and comfort. He named them as they hatched. The first and largest he called Hana, which meant one in Korean. The second was Duri, meaning two. Then came Seri and Neri, who hatched within minutes of each other and seemed to share some invisible connection. The fifth was Dari, the most aggressive of the group, always pushing to the front, always watching for danger. The last egg took longest to hatch. When it finally cracked open, the creature inside was small and weak. It could barely crawl, and its scales were dull compared to its siblings. Taiho held it gently in his hands, worried it would not survive. Bomi, he said softly, naming it after a word that meant spring. You will be Bomi. You will grow strong, I promise. But Bomi did not grow strong. None of them did. Despite the warmth and safety of the cave, all 6 creatures were getting weaker by the day. They refused to eat anything Taiho offered. He tried protein paste from his supplies. They turned away. He tried water. They ignored it. He crushed minerals from the cave walls, hoping they might need some kind of nutrient he did not understand. Nothing worked. Taiho watched them grow thinner and weaker, and he felt helpless. He had saved them from the cold only to watch them starve. Bomi was the worst. By the 5th day after hatching, she could barely lift her head. That night, Taiho held Bomi against his chest and cried. He had failed. He had tried so hard, but it was not enough. These creatures would die, and there was nothing he could do. As he cried, a drop of blood fell from his face. The cut on his forehead, which had never healed properly, had opened again. The blood landed on Bomi's mouth. She moved. Her small tongue came out and touched the blood. Then her eyes opened wide and she began to lick his forehead eagerly, seeking more. Taiho was so shocked that he froze. Bomi made a sound he had never heard before, a sound of desperate hunger being finally satisfied. Understanding hit Taiho like a punch to the stomach. They did not eat food. They drank blood. They needed his blood to survive. He looked at the 6 creatures, all watching him now with their large, intelligent eyes. Bomi was already looking stronger, her scales gaining a bit of shine. The others were chirping, crowding toward him, drawn by the smell. Taiho thought about what this meant. He thought about his already weakened body, his limited supplies, the weeks or months he might need to survive before rescue came. If he fed them, he would grow weaker. He might die. He probably would die. But if he did not feed them, they would certainly die. Taiho reached into his medical kit and pulled out a small knife. He pressed the blade against his palm and made a cut. Blood welled up immediately, bright red against his pale skin. Come, he said to the creatures. Eat. I have enough for all of you. They came to him eagerly, their small mouths latching onto his hand, drinking the life from his veins. Taiho watched them feed and felt no regret. This was the right choice. This was the only choice. He would keep them alive, even if it killed him. From that day forward, Taiho fed them twice daily. He learned to manage the blood loss, to eat enough to keep producing, to rest when his body demanded it. He grew pale and thin, often dizzy from anemia. But the creatures grew strong. Their scales hardened. Their eyes brightened. They began to hunt small cave insects to supplement their diet, though they still came to Taiho for their main meals. They loved him. He could see it in the way they followed him everywhere, the way they curled around him when he slept, the way they chirped with joy when he spoke to them. And he loved them too, not as pets, not as science experiments, as his children. 2 months on Velas 4 changed Park Taiho in ways he never expected. His body had grown weak from constant blood loss, his clothes hanging loose on his thin frame. Dark circles lived permanently under his eyes, and his hands shook sometimes when he tried to do simple tasks. But every time he looked at his 6 children, thriving and growing stronger each day, he knew it was worth it. The creatures had grown rapidly. They were now the size of large dogs, their serpentine bodies stretching over a meter long. Their scales had hardened into something like armor, shimmering with colors that shifted in the light. They moved with grace and power, hunting the cave creatures that lived in the deeper tunnels with terrifying efficiency. But they always came back to Taiho. Always. Each of them had developed their own personality, as distinct as any human child. Hana, the firstborn, was calm and watchful. She seemed to understand Taiho's words better than the others, responding to simple commands with quick intelligence. When Taiho said, "Come," she came. When he said, "Stay," she stayed. She often positioned herself at the cave entrance, watching for danger like a guardian. Dory was different. He spent hours staring at the sky through the cave mouth, his eyes tracking the movement of clouds and dust. At first, Taiho thought it was simple curiosity. Then he noticed a pattern. Every time Dory became agitated, pacing and making low warning sounds, a dust storm would arrive within hours. Somehow Dory could sense the storms before they came. His warnings had saved Taiho from being caught outside 3 times already. Siri and Neri were impossible to separate. They moved in perfect harmony, as if sharing a single mind. When one turned left, the other turned right at exactly the same moment. When one caught prey, the other was already there to help tear it apart. Taiho wondered if they could communicate silently, sharing thoughts across some connection he could not see or understand. Dari was the protector. Aggressive and fierce, he viewed everything as a potential threat to his family. Strange sounds made him hiss and bare his teeth. Unfamiliar smells made him position himself between Taiho and the source. He had grown the largest of the 6, his claws thick and sharp, his scales the darkest. Taiho sometimes worried about Dari's aggression, but he also felt safe knowing the creature would fight to the death to protect them. And then there was Bomi, small, gentle Bomi, who had almost died in those first days. She never grew as large as her siblings, never developed their hunting instincts or aggressive tendencies. Instead, she developed something else entirely. Bomi could glow. At first, Taiho thought he was imagining it. A soft light seemed to come from beneath her scales, barely visible in the darkness. But as days passed, the glow grew stronger, and Taiho realized it changed color based on his emotions. When he was calm and content, Bomi glowed a soft gold. When he was worried, she turned pale blue. When he felt sad, missing his sister Yuna, or remembering his dead crewmates, Bomi's light deepened to a rich, sorrowful purple. She seemed to feel what he felt, responding to his heart with her own body. She never left his side. While the others explored the caves or hunted or played, Bomi stayed with Taiho. She pressed against his chest when he slept, her warmth and light keeping the nightmares away. She chirped softly when he talked, as if answering him in a language he was slowly beginning to understand. One night after a particularly bad day when Taiho had lost too much blood and could barely stand, Bomi did something unexpected. She crawled onto his chest as he lay in the nest, and her glow intensified. Warmth spread through his body, starting from his heart and flowing outward. His dizziness faded. His strength returned slightly. When he looked at his hand, the fresh cut had partially healed. Bomi had given something back to him. Some of the energy he had given her returned when he needed it most. Taiho held her close and cried. These creatures were not simple animals. They were something more, something wonderful and strange and beautiful. During his second month on Velis 4, Taiho finally managed to repair the rescue beacon. It was crude work, using parts from the escape pod and materials scavenged from the cave. But when he pressed the activation button, a small light turned green. The signal was transmitting. Help would come. Eventually, somehow, other humans would receive the signal and come to investigate. Taiho should have felt relieved. He should have celebrated. Instead, he sat in the cave surrounded by his children and felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. What would happen when humans arrived? These creatures were unknown to science. They were powerful and strange and valuable. Governments would want to study them. Corporations would want to own them. Military organizations would want to weaponize them. Taiho looked at Hana, sitting alert at the cave entrance. He looked at Duri, watching the sky for storms. He looked at Sari and Neri, playing some game that only they understood. He looked at Dari, standing guard over the family he had claimed as his own. He looked at Bomi, glowing softly gold against his chest. They trusted him completely. They loved him without doubt or condition. They had given him a reason to survive when everything seemed hopeless. How could he hand them over to people who would see them as specimens instead of souls? "I will not let anyone hurt you," Taiho whispered to them. "No matter what happens. I promise." Bomi's glow brightened at his words as if she understood. Maybe she did. Maybe they all did. 6 days later, Taiho heard the sound of engines in the sky. He walked to the cave entrance and looked up, shielding his eyes against the light. A ship was descending through the atmosphere, its hull gleaming silver against the purple clouds. Rescue had arrived. Taiho took a deep breath and turned back to his children. They had gathered behind him, sensing his anxiety, their bodies tense and ready. Dari was already hissing softly, his claws extended. "Stay calm," Taiho said, keeping his voice steady even though his heart was racing. "Stay close to me. Do not attack unless I tell you to. We will get through this together." He walked back to them and knelt down, placing his hands on as many of them as he could reach. They pressed against him, seeking comfort, giving comfort in return. "I love you," he said. "All of you. Remember that. No matter what happens next, remember that I love you." Bomi glowed bright gold. Dari stopped hissing. Hana made a soft sound that seemed almost like a word. Outside, the ship was landing. Voices called out, searching for survivors. Footsteps approached the cave. Taiho stood up and faced the entrance, his children arranged behind him like a protective wall. The future was uncertain and frightening, but he was not alone. He would never be alone again. Whatever came next, they would face it as a family. The rescue ship was called Horizon's Edge, and its captain was a woman named Yoon Jimin. She was tall and strong, with short black hair and eyes that missed nothing. She had been a military officer before becoming a cargo captain, and she still carried herself like a soldier. When she entered the cave with her crew, she expected to find a body. The distress signal from Velis 4 had been weak and damaged. No one really believed anyone could survive 2 months on this barren moon. She had come to recover remains and write a sad report about another life lost to the coldness of space. Instead, she found Park Taiho standing in the middle of a glowing chamber, surrounded by 6 alien creatures that hissed and snapped at her approach. "Stay back," Taiho said immediately, raising his hand. His voice was rough from disuse, but his eyes were sharp and determined. "They will not hurt you if you do not threaten them." Jimin stopped her crew with a gesture. Behind her, 12 armed soldiers raised their weapons, pointing at the creatures. The creatures responded by pressing closer to Taiho, forming a protective circle around him. "What in the stars is happening here?" Jimin asked, her voice calm but tense. Taiho explained quickly. The crash, the eggs, the mother's body, now buried under rocks he had carefully arranged as a grave. 2 months of survival, feeding the creatures with his own blood, watching them grow and develop. As he spoke, Jimin's xenobiologist pushed forward. Her name was Kang Eunji, a sharp-featured woman with quick movements and hungry eyes. She stared at the creatures with obvious excitement. "Impossible," Eunji breathed. "These are Velicians. They have to be. Look at the scale pattern, the body structure, the bioluminescence." She turned to Jimin with wide eyes. "Captain, Velicians have been extinct for over 1,000 years. They were the dominant species in this sector before they vanished. These 6 creatures might be the last of their kind." The soldiers tensed at this information. Taiho saw their grips tighten on their weapons. "Everyone remain calm," Jimin ordered. She looked at Taiho with something like respect. "You kept them alive? For 2 months? By yourself?" "They are my children now," Taiho said simply. "I will not let anyone harm them." Dari chose that moment to lunge forward, snapping his jaws at a soldier who had stepped too close. The soldier screamed and fell backward. Other soldiers aimed their weapons at Dari, ready to fire. "No!" Taiho threw himself between Dari and the guns. "He was protecting me. Do not shoot him, please." Jimin held up her fist, stopping her soldiers from firing. The moment stretched, tense and dangerous. Then Taiho did something that surprised everyone. He pulled out his small knife, cut his palm, and offered the blood to Dari. The creature immediately calmed, licking the wound with a gentleness that seemed impossible from something so fierce. The other creatures relaxed as well, their aggressive postures softening. "You see?" Taiho said quietly. "They are not monsters. They are children. They just need someone to understand them." The next few hours were complicated. Jimin moved her crew back to the ship, leaving only herself, Yunji, and 2 guards in the cave. She asked Taiho questions about everything, from the crash to the creature's abilities to his current physical condition. Yunji examined Taiho and declared him severely anemic and malnourished. "You should be dead," she said bluntly. "The amount of blood you have lost over 2 months should have killed you 3 times over." Taiho looked at Bomi, who glowed softly at his feet. "They gave some of it back, when I needed it most." That made Yunji's scientific interest burn even brighter. She wanted samples, tests, controlled experiments. Taiho refused everything. "They are not specimens," he said firmly. "They are people, strange people from another species, but people. I will not let you treat them like laboratory animals." Before Yunji could argue, Jimin's communication device beeped. She stepped away to take the call, and when she returned, her face was troubled. "Word has spread," she said quietly. "I do not know how, but someone on my crew must have sent a message. The military knows about the Velicians. They are sending a special team to take the creatures for study." Taiho's blood ran cold. "No, I will not allow it." "You might not have a choice," Jimin said. "The orders come from high up, very high up. These creatures are too valuable to leave in the hands of a cargo engineer." The creatures sensed Taiho's distress. They gathered around him, pressing their bodies against his legs and arms. Bomi's glow turned the deep blue of worry. Dari began to growl, his eyes fixed on the cave entrance. "Then we run," Taiho said. "We take your ship and we run. They can chase us across the galaxy if they want. I will not hand my children over to people who will cut them open to see how they work." Jimin was silent for a long moment. Taiho saw the conflict in her eyes. She was a captain, bound by rules and orders. Helping him would be treason. It would end her career at best and her life at worst. But she was also looking at the creatures, at the way they curled around this thin, exhausted man who had nearly killed himself to keep them alive. She was looking at Bomi, glowing with an emotion that crossed species boundaries. She was looking at Dari, fierce and loyal, ready to die for his family. "My younger brother loved animals," Jimin said suddenly. "He would spend hours watching birds, feeding stray cats, crying when he found injured creatures. He died in a transport accident when he was 12. He never got to grow up, never got to protect all the creatures he loved." She looked at Taiho with new eyes. "I think he would have liked you." Jimin made a decision that would change her life forever. She told her crew that the creatures had died during transport. Natural causes. Nothing could be done. She filed the report herself, lying to military command with a steady voice. Then she helped Taiho carry his children onto the horizon's edge and set course for deep space. "Where are we going?" Taiho asked as the ship lifted off from Velis 4. "Somewhere safe," Jimin replied. "Somewhere they cannot find us easily. I know people in the outer systems. People who do not ask questions." Taiho watched the moon shrink in the view screen, the place where he had nearly died, the place where he had become a father. "Thank you," he said to Jimin. "You did not have to do this." "No," she agreed. "I did not. But some things are more important than orders. Your brother taught me that, even if he never knew it." She smiled, and for the first time in months, Taiho felt hope. The horizon's edge vanished into the darkness of space, carrying 1 human and 6 aliens toward an uncertain future. Behind them, the military ships arrived at Velis 4 to find nothing but an empty cave, and a grave marked with strange symbols. The hunt had begun, but the hunted were already gone. 3 months of running had changed everyone aboard the horizon's edge. The ship, once a proud cargo freighter, now looked like a patchwork of stolen parts and desperate repairs. Its hull was scarred from close encounters with bounty hunters. Its fuel tanks were always nearly empty. Its crew had shrunk to just 7 people, the only ones willing to risk their lives for creatures they barely understood. Captain Yoon Jimin had lost everything: her rank, her reputation, her comfortable life in the legal trade routes. But she had gained something else: purpose. Park Taiho sat in the cargo hold, surrounded by his children. They had grown massive over the past months, each one now the size of a small horse. Their bodies barely fit in the hold anymore, their tails coiling around support beams, their scales scraping against the walls. Hana had learned to interface with the ship's computer. She could access systems with her mind, opening doors and adjusting temperatures without anyone touching a control. The crew had been terrified at first, then amazed. then grateful when her ability saved them from an ambush by detecting hostile ships before the sensors did. Dory's storm sense had evolved into something greater. He could feel disturbances in space itself, sensing approaching vessels hours before they arrived. His warnings had saved the ship more times than anyone could count. Sari and Neri had grown even more connected, now able to coordinate attacks with perfect precision. When bounty hunters had boarded the ship 2 weeks ago, the twins had torn through them like living weapons, protecting the crew with terrifying efficiency. Dari had become a monster of battle. His claws could cut through ship armor. His scales could deflect energy weapons. He had killed 17 enemies in the past 3 months, and he would kill 1,000 more to protect his family. And Bomi, sweet, gentle Bomi, had become something like a healer. Her glow could soothe wounds, calm panic, ease pain. When Jimin had been shot during a firefight, Bomi had pressed against her for hours, her light pulsing with concentration, until the wound closed and the captain could walk again. But something was wrong. For the past week, all 6 creatures had been restless. They paced constantly, making sounds and frequencies that hurt human ears. They refused to eat. They gathered in circles and swayed together, their lights pulsing in rhythms that seemed almost like language. Bomi's glow had turned a deep, urgent red that never faded. She pressed against Taiho constantly, making sounds of distress that broke his heart. "What is wrong?" he asked her, stroking her scales. "What are you trying to tell me?" She could not answer in words. But her eyes were fixed on the stars outside, staring at a specific point in space with desperate intensity. They were calling to something, and something was answering. It happened without warning. One moment, the ship was alone in empty space. The next moment, reality itself seemed to tear open. A ship emerged from the wound in space, and ship was not really the right word. It was alive. Kilometers long, its hull pulsed with bioluminescence identical to the Velicians aboard the horizon's edge. It moved through space like a sea creature through water, graceful and terrible and ancient beyond imagination. It dwarfed anything humanity had ever built. Jimin stared at the view screen, her face pale. "What is that?" Taiho knew. Somehow in his heart, he knew. "Their mother," he whispered. The presence touched his mind like a wave crashing over a beach. It was vast and ancient and feminine, filled with emotions he had no names for. It searched through his thoughts, examining his memories, looking for something. Then it found him. The full weight of its attention settled on his consciousness, and Taiho fell to his knees. "You have my children." The voice was inside his head, resonating through every fiber of his being. It was not angry, it was not grateful. It simply was, like the voice of a god looking down at an insect. "I have searched for them for 3 of your months. I felt their calls across the vast darkness. I followed their voices to this place, and I find them with you, human. With the creature who bears their marks on his body." Taiho understood what she meant. The scars on his arms and hands, the cuts that had never properly healed, the marks of months of feeding. He was covered in evidence of what he had done. "The guardian I left with them is dead. My children should have died with her. They did not. Why?" Taiho could not speak out loud. His voice would not work, but his thoughts were open to her, and he simply remembered. He let her see everything. The crash, the cave, the eggs cooling in the dark. His decision to save them even though it made no sense. The weeks of building heating systems and rationing supplies. The discovery that they needed blood, his blood, to survive. The choice to give it anyway. He showed her Bomi, small and weak, nearly dying until he fed her. He showed her Dari, fierce and protective, ready to kill anyone who threatened the family. He showed her Hana's intelligence, Duri's warnings, the twins' perfect coordination. He showed her the love, the impossible, undeniable love that had grown between a human and 6 alien children who should have been his prey or his predators. The presence was silent for a long moment. Taiho felt her examining his memories like someone reading a book, turning each page with careful attention. "You nearly died for them," she said. "Many times. You gave your blood, your health, your safety. You fought against your own kind to protect them." "Why?" Taiho thought of his mother, working herself to death for her children. He thought of Yuna, his sister struggling alone on Earth. He thought of every person who had ever helped him when they had no reason to. Because they needed me, he thought back. Because they were alone and afraid and dying. Because I could help, even if it cost me everything. That is what you do for family. That is what you do for the ones you love. The presence seemed to shift, something changing in its vast consciousness. Family, she repeated. You call them family. You, a human, call my children your family. Yes, Taiho thought simply. They are my children now, yours and mine both. I will die before I let anyone hurt them. Another long silence. Taiho could feel the crew of the Horizon's Edge frozen around him, unable to move under the weight of the alien presence. He could feel his 6 children calling out joyfully, their voices mixing with their true mother's song in harmonies that made his soul ache with beauty. Then the presence did something unexpected. She laughed. It was not a human laugh. It was something vast and strange and wonderful, echoing through Taiho's mind like music. In 1,000 years, no creature has surprised me. I thought I understood all the species of this galaxy. Cold, selfish, dangerous. I prepared for war when I came here. I prepared to destroy your ships, rescue my children, and leave your kind to rot. Her presence softened, becoming almost gentle. But you, Park Taeho, you are not what I expected. You are something new, something I have not seen before. The living ship moved closer, its massive form filling the view screen. Come, the mother said. Come aboard my vessel. Bring my children home. And you, their father, their protector, their family, come and help me understand what humans truly are. Taiho looked at Jimin, who was slowly recovering from the mental contact. Her eyes were wide with fear and wonder. I have to go, Taiho said quietly. She wants to meet me. She wants to understand. This could be a trap, Jimin warned. Taiho looked at his children, all 6 of them gathered around him, their eyes bright with joy at their mother's return. Bomi glowed pure gold, the color of happiness. No, he said. It is not a trap. It is something else. Something important. He walked toward the airlock, his children following. The living ship opened to receive them, a passage of light extending through the void. Taiho stepped forward into the unknown, into the presence of an ancient being who would decide the fate of 2 species. Whatever happened next, he would face it with his family beside him. The inside of the living ship was nothing like Taiho expected. He had imagined something dark and organic, like walking through the body of a massive creature. Instead, he found himself in spaces of light and beauty that made his heart ache. The walls glowed with soft colors that shifted as he moved. The air smelled like flowers he had never known, fresh and sweet and alive. The floor beneath his feet was warm and smooth, responding to his steps with gentle pulses of light. His children moved around him with joy, their bodies dancing through the corridors they somehow remembered from before their birth. They called out in their musical language, and the ship answered them, its walls rippling with harmonies that made Taiho want to weep. They were home. After all this time, they were finally home. A guide appeared before them, a smaller Velician who bowed respectfully to Taiho and his children. Without words, she led them deeper into the ship, through chambers that seemed to exist in more dimensions than human eyes could see. Finally, they reached the heart of the vessel. The queen waited for them there. She was vast. That was the only word that came close to describing her. Her physical body filled a chamber the size of a stadium, her serpentine form coiled around itself in patterns that hurt to look at directly. But Taiho understood that what he was seeing was only part of her. She existed partially in other dimensions, in spaces his mind could not comprehend. Her eyes, hundreds of them, scattered across her form, all turned to look at him. Each eye was larger than his entire body. Each one held intelligence older than human civilization. Park Taiho, she said, her voice filling his mind. Father of my lost children. I would know you better. Before Taiho could respond, she reached into his memories. It was not painful, it was not violent, but it was complete. She saw everything he had ever experienced, from his earliest childhood memory to this very moment. She saw his mother's tired smile after a long day of work. She saw his father's funeral, the rain falling on the grave. She saw Yuna as a baby, crying in his arms while their mother slept. She saw him growing up poor and struggling, learning to fix machines because he could not afford to buy new ones. She saw him joining the Space Corps to send money home to his sister. She saw his crewmates on the Wanderer's Rest, their faces laughing around a dinner table that would soon be destroyed. She saw the crash, the cave, the eggs. She saw him building the heating system with broken fingers and a bleeding forehead. She saw him refusing to give up, refusing to let the eggs die, even when logic told him they were not his problem. She saw the hatching. She saw him naming each child, holding them close, learning their personalities. She saw the first time he cut his palm and offered his blood. She saw months of sacrifice, pale skin and shaking hands, dizziness and weakness and pain. She saw him cutting himself open twice a day, every day, watching his life flow into creatures he had no reason to love. But he loved them anyway. She saw him singing Korean lullabies to Bomi during dust storms, the same songs his mother had sung to him. She saw him teaching Hana simple words, praising her when she responded correctly. She saw him training Dari to control his aggression, patient and gentle even when the creature snapped at him. She saw Captain Jimin risking everything to help him. She saw the crew member Han Siwoo giving up his food rations so Taiho would have enough strength to keep feeding the children. She saw humans who had nothing to gain from helping, choosing to help anyway. She saw love, pure, unconditional love crossing the boundaries of species. The Queen withdrew from his mind slowly, carefully, leaving no damage. Taiho gasped and fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. The memories she had touched were raw and fresh, as if he was living them all again at once. His children gathered around him, pressing their bodies against his, lending him their warmth and strength. Bomi glowed so bright that the chamber filled with golden light. "Why?" the Queen asked. Her voice was different now, softer, confused. "You are human. My children are Velician. We are not your kind. We are not your responsibility. We could have been your enemy. Why did you do this?" Taiho looked up at her, at this being who could destroy humanity with a thought. He was small and weak and mortal, but he was not afraid. "Because someone had to," he said, his voice steady despite his tears. "Because they were alone and afraid and needed help. Because helping others is what makes life worth living. Because my mother taught me that the measure of a person is not what they take, but what they give." He stood up slowly, supported by his children. "I do not know your species. I do not know your history. I do not know if you are good or evil or something in between. But I know that when I found those eggs, I had a choice. I could walk away and save myself, or I could stay and give them a chance to live." He spread his scarred hands, showing her the evidence of his sacrifice. "I chose to stay. I will always choose to stay. That is who I am. That is who humans can be when we are at our best." The Queen was silent for a long time. Around them, the living ship pulsed with soft light, as if breathing. "In my long life, I have watched many species rise and fall," she said finally. "I have seen civilizations destroy themselves with greed and war. I have seen kindness crushed by cruelty. I had given up hope that any species could be worthy of the stars." Her massive head lowered, bringing her closest eye level with Taiho. He could see himself reflected in its surface, small but standing tall. "You have shown me something I had forgotten. You have reminded me that goodness can exist anywhere, in any form. That love does not care about boundaries or differences. That a human can become father to Velicians and mean it with his whole heart." The Queen did something then that no Velician had done in 1,000 years. She bowed, her massive form bent before this small, fragile human, acknowledging him as an equal. Around the chamber, other Velicians who had gathered to watch gasped and trembled. "Park Tae-ho," she said, "I came here prepared to judge humanity. I came prepared to destroy you if I found my children harmed. Instead, I find them thriving, loved, protected by one who nearly died for them." She rose again, her eyes still fixed on him. "You have passed judgment, not by my standards, but by your own. You are worthy of the stars. Perhaps your species is as well." Taiho did not know what to say. He simply stood there, surrounded by his children, tears still wet on his face, and felt the weight of the moment settle around him. Everything was about to change. For him, for humanity, for the galaxy, and it had all started with a choice in a dark cave, when a broken man decided that 6 alien eggs deserved a chance to live. 1 year had passed since the Queen's judgment. 1 year since the galaxy changed forever. Park Tae-ho stood at the observation deck of the Queen's ship, watching stars drift by like scattered diamonds. He looked healthier now, his body recovered from the months of blood loss and starvation. His skin had color again, his hands no longer shook, but the scars remained, silver lines covering his arms and palms, like a map of everything he had given. He wore those scars with pride. The Velician Queen had revealed herself to the galactic community 6 months ago. The announcement had shaken humanity to its core. An ancient species, once thought extinct, had returned, and they were powerful beyond anything humans had ever encountered. Governments panicked, militaries mobilized, corporations saw opportunities. Everyone wanted to know what the Velicians would do. Would they conquer? Would they trade? Would they destroy humanity for the crimes of the past? The answer came in an unexpected form. The Queen declared that humanity would not be judged by their governments or their corporations or their armies. They would be judged by one man. Park Tae-ho, the human who had bled for her children, would speak for his species. The reaction was chaos. Politicians demanded to meet him. Scientists wanted to study him. Journalists chased every detail of his story. Religious groups declared him a prophet. Other groups declared him a traitor. Tae-ho ignored all of them. He stayed aboard the Queen's ship in quarters designed specifically for human biology. The rooms had proper atmosphere, proper gravity, proper temperature. They even had windows that showed views of Earth, transmitted in real time across light years of space. He could watch his home planet whenever he wanted, but he rarely did. Home was here now. Home was where his children were. Hana had grown to full size, her body longer than a shuttle, her intelligence surpassing anything humans could measure. She served as an advisor to the Queen herself, translating between Velician thought and human concepts. Dory had become a navigator, his ability to sense disturbances in space making him invaluable for plotting safe courses through dangerous regions. He still came to Tae-ho every morning, pressing his massive head against his father's chest in greeting. Sari and Neri had become warriors, their perfect coordination making them unstoppable in combat. They protected the Queen's ship from threats that occasionally appeared from the darker corners of space, but they always found time to play together, still sharing whatever bond connected them. Dari had become the fiercest guardian in the Velician fleet. His reputation terrified enemies before they even saw him. But with Tae-ho, he was gentle as a lamb, lying beside his father's bed at night, rumbling with contentment when Tae-ho scratched behind his scales. And Bomi had never grown as large as her siblings. She remained the smallest, the gentlest, the one who preferred comfort over combat. She had become the Queen's primary healer, her ability to mend wounds and soothe pain, making her precious beyond measure. But her first loyalty was always to Tae-ho. She spent every possible moment with him, her glow reflecting his emotions, her presence keeping the loneliness away. When he slept, she coiled around him. When he woke, she was the first thing he saw. When he was sad, she pressed against his heart until the sadness passed. He loved them all. He loved them more than he had ever loved anything. The Queen had offered Tae-ho everything: wealth beyond imagination, power that could make him a ruler of worlds, knowledge that could advance human science by centuries. He had turned it all down. "I do not want power," he told her. "I do not want wealth. I want to be with my children. I want to help bridge the gap between our species. That is enough. That is all I need." So that had become his purpose. He served as an advisor on human behavior, explaining the strange ways of his species to the Velicians. He helped write treaties and trade agreements. He mediated disputes when human and Velician interests clashed. It was difficult work. Humans were often selfish and short-sighted, focused on immediate gains rather than long-term harmony. Tae-ho had to argue for his species even when he was ashamed of their behavior. But he also saw the best of humanity. He saw scientists who wanted to learn, not exploit. He saw diplomats who genuinely sought peace. He saw ordinary people who heard his story and were inspired to be better than they were. One day, Captain Yoon Jimin arrived for a visit. She commanded a diplomatic vessel now, her record cleared by Valisian intervention, her career restored to heights she never imagined. She came aboard the Queen's ship with gifts, real coffee, letters from Taiho's sister Yuna, and news from Earth. They sat together in his quarters, drinking coffee and talking about old times. Bomi lay at Taiho's feet, glowing soft gold. "You could come home," Jimin said eventually. "The Queen would let you. Yuna misses you. Earth misses you. You are a hero there, you know. People tell your story to their children." Taiho smiled sadly. "I know. I received the letters. I watched the broadcasts. I am grateful for the love people show me." He looked out the window at the stars. "But I cannot leave. My children are here. My purpose is here. This is where I belong now." Jimin nodded slowly. She had expected this answer, but she needed to offer the choice. "Are you happy?" she asked. Taiho considered the question carefully. He thought about everything he had lost: his crewmates on the Wanderer's Rest, his easy life as a simple engineer, his ability to walk the streets of Busan, to eat at the restaurant where his mother used to work, to visit her grave on rainy afternoons. He thought about everything he had gained: 6 children who loved him completely, a purpose larger than himself, the chance to shape the relationship between 2 species. He thought about Bomi, glowing at his feet, about Dari, who would die to protect him, about Hana, whose intelligence amazed him daily, about Duri, Seri, and Neri, who had grown into magnificent beings. He thought about the choice he had made in a dark cave, when he could have walked away and saved himself. "Yes," he said finally, "I am happy. Happier than I ever thought I could be." Jimin smiled and raised her coffee cup. "Then that is all that matters. To family." "To family," Taiho agreed, raising his own cup. Outside, the stars continued their eternal dance. Somewhere in that vastness, Earth spun on its axis, carrying billions of humans who were slowly learning that they were not alone in the universe. Inside the Queen's ship, a man who had given everything sat with an old friend, drinking coffee and watching his smallest child glow with contentment. The future was uncertain. Challenges waited ahead. The relationship between humans and Valisians would require centuries of work to truly flourish. But Park Taiho was not worried. He had learned that the greatest challenges could be overcome with the simplest of tools: love, sacrifice, the willingness to bleed for those who needed protection. He had chosen to stay, that day in the cave. He had chosen to love, even when it cost him everything. And that choice had changed the galaxy. Not with weapons, not with politics, not with grand strategies, with a single act of kindness, repeated until it became something greater than any empire. That was the power of humanity at its best. That was the legacy of Park Taiho, father of the last Valisians, bridge between species, the man who gave his blood so that others might live. And as Bomi's glow brightened to purest gold, matching the joy in his heart, Taiho knew that he would make the same choice again, 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times, forever. Because that was what family meant. Because that was what love could do. Because in the end, the smallest acts of kindness were the ones that mattered most.